Hi everyone, Jim here. We're going to do another round of the translation comparison shootout for Dante. I've got this narrowed down to a short list of 5 verse translations of Dante. I've got John Ciardi, I've got Robert Pinsky, I've got Anthony Esolen, I have Alan Mandelbaum, and I have Dorothy Sayers. What's your favorite of these 5? We're going to find out in our lightning round. Let's bring it on. Okay, if you missed my first shootout, I did about 9 different translations, and we read a short passage from the beginning, Canto V of the Inferno. And I picked some favorites just on first impression, the ones that I thought sounded best, read the best, meant the most. And I've now narrowed that field. So one of those translations that I didn't like as much as the others, the Robin Kilpatrick, I have indeed unhauled that. I just unhauled it yesterday. But this one over here, the Alan Mandelbaum, I neglected to include in the shootout. And in fact, it was right here behind me on the shelves, but I just missed it. And so I did read the first lines in the Inferno, and I thought it fared very well. So I'm going to now include this late entrant in our shootout. It's going to be fun. I think Mandelbaum's definitely a worthy translator. And then we've got Dorothy Sayers over here. We have Anthony Esolen. We have John Ciardi and Robert Pinsky. One note about Pinsky, as I was reviewing the video shootout, the first video, I thought I was a little hard on Pinsky. When I reread it and when I listened to my reading of it, I thought, that's not that bad. I'm going to include him in the lightning round. So we have only 5 this time, and we're going to pick a very famous story from Canto V of the Inferno, the story of Paolo and Francesca. And we're going to jump in around line 100 or so and read that to the end of the canto. So it's about 25 lines, maybe, something like that, 26. One of the higher circles of the Inferno. And these are sort of lovers who are sort of cast around in the winds and so forth. So there is some prelude to this, but I'm just going to cut in around line 100. So we'll start with Robert Pinsky, since that's what I have open here. This translation happens to have the Italian on the facing page, if you like to compare. So here we go. Of the poet ask, "What are you thinking?" I answered, "Alas, that sweet conceptions and passion so deep should bring them here." Then looking up toward the lovers, "Francesca, your suffering makes me weep for sorrow and pity. But tell me, in the hours of sweetest sighing, how and in what shape or manner did love first show you those desires so hemmed in by doubt?" And she to me, "No sadness is greater than in misery to rehearse memories of joy, as your teacher well can witness. But if you have so great a craving to measure our love's first root, I'll tell it, with the fitness of one who weeps and tells. One day, for pleasure, we read of Lancelot by love constrained, alone, suspecting nothing, at our leisure. Sometimes at what we read our glances joined, looking from the book each to the other's eyes, and then the color in our faces drained. But one particular moment alone, it was defeated us. The longed-for smile, it said, was kissed by that most noble lover. At this one, who now will never leave my side, kissed my mouth, trembling. At Gelato, that book, and so was he who wrote it. That day we read no further. All the while, the one shade spoke, the other at her side was weeping. My pity overwhelmed me, and I felt myself go slack. Swooning as in death, I fell like a dying body. That's the Robert Pinsky. Let's move on to Anthony Esolen. Canto V, cut in around line 100. This also has the Italian on the verso page. Such were the words they offered, and I bowed my head to hear the story of those souls and what they suffered, bowed so low at last. The poet said, "What are you thinking of?" When I could speak, I thus began, "Alas, what great desire, what sweet and tender thoughts have led these lovers to this woeful pass." Turning to them once more, I spoke again. "Francesca," I began, "your torments move my heart to weep in pity for your pain. But tell me, in the season of sweet sighs, how did it happen? What made love give way that you should know the truth of your desires?" And she, to me, "There is no greater grief than to recall a time of happiness while plunged in misery, as your teacher knows. But if so great a longing urges you to know about the first root of our love, then I will tell you, speaking through my tears. One day, we two were reading for delight about how love had mastered Lancelot. We were alone and innocent and felt no cause to fear. And as we read, at times we went pale as we caught each other's glance. But we were conquered by one point alone. For when we read that the much longed-for smile accepted such a gentle lover's kiss, this man, whom nothing will divide from me, trembled to place his lips upon my mouth. A pander was that author and his book. That day we did not read another page. And all the while one spirit told their tale. The other wept so sadly that I fell, for pity of it, to a death-like faint, and I dropped like a body stricken dead. That's Anthony Esolen. Let's go on and try out John Ciardi. And when I had heard those world-offended lovers, I bowed my head. At last the poet spoke. "What painful thoughts are those your lowered brow covers?" When at length I answered, I began, "Alas, what sweetest thoughts, what green and young desire led these two lovers to this sorry pass?" Then turning to those spirits once again, I said, "Francesca, what you suffer here melts me to tears of pity and of pain. But tell me, in the time of your sweet sighs, by what appearances found love the way to lure you to his perilous paradise?" And she, "The double grief of a lost bliss is to recall its happy hour in pain. Your guide and teacher knows the truth of this. But if there is indeed a soul in hell to ask at the beginning of our love, out of his pity, I will weep and tell. On a day for dalliance, we read the rhyme of Lancelot, how love had mastered him. We were alone with innocence and dim time. Pause after pause, that high old story drew our eyes together while we blushed and paled. But it was one soft passage overthrew our caution and our hearts. For when we read how her fond smile was kissed by such a lover, he who was one with me, alive and dead, breathed on my lips the tremor of his kiss. That book, and he who wrote it, was a pander. That day we read no further. As she said this, the other spirit, who stood by her, wept so piteously. I felt my senses reel and faint away with anguish. I was swept by such a swoon as death is, and I fell, as a corpse might fall to the dead floor of hell. That's John Ciardi. Let's move on to Alan Mandelbaum. Alan Mandelbaum. This is a very beat up copy that was my daughter's, and it got water damaged. So I'd like to replace this copy. Okay. By the way, the Mandelbaum also has Italian on the facing page. When I had listened to those injured souls, I bent my head and held it low until the poet asked of me, "What are you thinking?" When I replied, my words began, "Alas, how many gentle thoughts, how deep a longing has led them to the agonizing past." Then I addressed my speech again to them, and I began, "Francesca, your afflictions move me to tears of sorrow and of pity. But tell me, in the time of gentle sighs, with what and in what way did love allow you to recognize your still uncertain longings?" And she to me, "There is no greater sorrow than thinking back upon a happy time in misery. And this your teacher knows. Yet if you long so much to understand the first root of our love, then I shall tell my tale to you as one who weeps and speaks. One day, to pass the time away, we read of Lancelot, how love had overcome him. We were alone, and we suspected nothing. And time again, that reading led our eyes to meet and made our faces pale, and yet one point alone defeated us, when we had read how the desired smile was kissed by one who was so true a lover. This one, who never shall be parted from me, while all his body trembled, kissed my mouth. A Galahalt indeed, that book, and he who wrote it too. That day we read no more. And while one spirit said these words to me, the other wept, so that because of pity I fainted, as if I had met my death. And then I fell, as a dead body falls. And finally, we'll look at this Penguin Classics, first translation by Dorothy Sayers. Hearing those wounded souls, I bent my brow downward, and thus bemused, I let time pass, till the poet said at length, "What thinkest thou?" When I could answer, I began, "Alas, sweet thoughts how many, and desire how great, brought down these twain unto the dolorous pass." And then I turned to them. "Thy dreadful fate, Francesca, makes me weep. It so inspires pity," said I, "and grief compassionate. Tell me, in that time of sighing sweet desires, how and by what did love his power disclose, and grant you knowledge of your hidden fires?" Then she, to me, "The bitterest woe of woes is to remember in our wretchedness old happy times. And this thy doctor knows. Yet if so dear desire thy heart possessed to know that root of love which wrought our fall, I'll be as those who weep and who confess. One day we read for pastime how in thrall Lord Lancelot lay to love, who loved the queen. We were alone. We thought no harm at all. As we read on, our eyes met now and then, and to our cheeks the changing color started. But just one moment overcame us when we read of the smile, desired of lips long thwarted, such smile by such a lover kissed away, he that may never more from me be parted. Trembling all over, kissed my mouth. I say the book was Galliot, the complying ribald, who wrote. We read no more that day. While the one spirit thus spoke, the others crying wailed on me with a sound so lamentable, I swooned for pity like as I were dying, and as a dead man falling, down I fell. And those are our 5 translations. Well, here are my initial impressions of these, my hot takes. I would say this one was not my favorite. It felt a little bit too archaic. Maybe the diction's a little stilted. Just didn't do much for me. The Robert Pinsky, kind of like what happened with the first round, I felt like I was stumbling over the lines, like something syntactically doesn't quite flow for me with this. Maybe again I have to read it again, and also it was the first contestant here in our round, and I'm like trying to get used to the passage, so it might have been the way I read it, but I would not say this was my favorite either. That brings us to the next 3, all of which I liked. I thought the Mandelbaum was solid. I think, though, my favorites this time, again, were the Ciardi and the Esolen. I think I read this one second, and when I read this one, the whole passage, the whole story really clicked for me. I thought it flowed really well. The tempo, the pauses, just syntactically it worked really well. And it's an emotional story. I thought it was pretty strong. I liked the Esolen. The Ciardi was also very, very good. There were certain lines here that I thought flowed maybe even better than Esolen. It was a little bit back and forth between those two. And it was solid. And then again, the Mandelbaum. I'm gonna not even declare a winner here. I'm just gonna say my top 3: Mandelbaum, Esolen, and Ciardi. And I sort of feel like these 2, I slightly give the nod to over this one, but it's close. I would have to read Mandelbaum even more, but I think he's up there. There's a certain directness to his translation, like it flows well. I like translations that are accessible and flow and try to carry a certain emotional color, like that, show that forth. And I think these 3 did that the best. What are your thoughts? Is there a verse translation of the Paolo and Francesca story that you prefer? Are there better translations than the ones I read in this lightning round? That's all I have in the house in terms of my short. I said before I've got about 9. I guess I have about 8 translations now because I unhauled the Kirkpatrick. But it's nice to have a variety. You can go back and forth. You can compare notes. I think the more you kind of like crowdsource translations, the higher your hopes for capturing maybe what the original is like. But that was fun. I don't know if we'll do another final round for Dante. I think we're kind of honing in on the target here. These two did really well in the first round, and I didn't cover this one in the first round. But I think if you just have these 3 translations, which are widely available, I think you're in pretty good shape. but I know there's others that I haven't read, so enlighten us in the comments. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed this little fun reading. It's a great story, isn't it? What I love about that story is really, it's only a few lines, but boy, does he get a lot of mileage out of that very condensed story. It's a beautiful, beautiful story. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching. Bye.